300 guests watched as my daughter wrapped her arms around a silver-haired stranger and called him Dad. My name is Ethan Cole, 64 years old, and I just finished paying almost $500,000 for her wedding. Imagine sitting in a ballroom you built surrounded by flowers you paid for, watching your own daughter tell a crowd you're dead, while a man you've never met takes your seat at the head table. Every vendor, every light, every crystal on those tables was paid from one account, mine. And yet, as the applause grew louder, I felt myself vanish. One moment of betrayal changed everything. What happened next shocked even me, and it definitely wasn't what those Greenwich socialites expected from a plumber in a borrowed tuxedo. Before I tell you how it ended, let me ask you something. If you've ever built someone a life with your own hands and then watched them erase you in public, you already know the taste in my mouth. If this story resonates with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment on where you're watching from. The applause went on a little too long, bright and hollow like rain on a tin roof. The quartet slid into something sweet while servers moved around me with trays that smelled of rosemary and butter. From table 9, I could see everything the room preferred not to look at. The swing of the kitchen door. The edge of the ice bucket was sweating on a station table. The way my daughter avoided the corner where I sat dead alive among rented flowers and crystal. A young coordinator drifted close with a clipboard pressed to her chest. "You must be with catering, sir." She did not look at my face when she said it. She looked at my jacket, at the place where a name tag would go if I were staff. "No, I paid for the lights above your head." Her eyes lifted then and caught the pattern of my gaze up into the chandeliers that were not quite gold and not quite silver, a color only money can buy. She shifted her weight, murmured an apology that had no home to settle in, and disappeared back into the current. The applause finally faded. The room exhaled. I did not. The stranger with my title had the kind of silver hair a pro keeps at that exact length. He lifted his hand in a modest greeting, as if humility were a cufflink you could order in pairs. Lydia leaned into him with a practiced smile that photographs clean. He patted her hand with the assurance of a man who had never dusted drywall from a shirt before dinner. Someone whispered near my table, and the words drifted like confetti toward the floor. "That is Arthur Whitlock Sr. He runs the firm. He is practically family." I rolled the stem of my glass between my fingers and watched light climb and fall through the wine. The room turned into a stage scene. One of the Whitlocks rose from the head table, offering something grand in that calm baritone that sounds expensive. My daughter tipped her chin to accept the blessing. When she glanced past the violins in my direction, she did not see me. She saw the kitchen door. You learn to count different things when you have built with your hands for 30 years. You count how many times a beam can take a load before it bows. You count the steps between the truck and the stoop. Tonight I counted exit signs and clocks. 10 o'clock has a sound if you listen closely. It is the sound a room makes when it waits for a signature. Somebody tapped a spoon against a glass near the head table. The bright chime cracked the surface of the moment, and for a second I was standing in a cramped gymnasium at Riverside Elementary. 4th grade chorus night. Lydia was in a white dress with a ribbon that would not stay tied. She scanned the bleachers the way children do, desperate and certain at the same time, and when she found me, she lifted her whole arm like a flare. After the music, she asked if I had heard her solo. I told her I heard all of it, even the parts where she only breathed. She laughed and said breathing did not count. I told her that was the part that kept the song alive. The memory closed like a book on my fingers, and I returned to the ballroom with a sting. A server reached across, collecting empties. His sleeve brushed the place card that said Table 9 in a script that belonged to some other life. On the far side of the room, the head planner conferred with 2 assistants' radios at their waists, like holstered secrets. I could almost hear their questions. Is the client comfortable? Will the payment clear by 10? The phrase client belongs to whoever signed. Names are gentle or sharp depending on where they appear. I slid the envelope a fraction of an inch inside my jacket, just enough to feel its edge. Paper with that kind of power has a temperature. It is cooler than skin. It waits without impatience. Lydia floated through the crowd like she had studied it. Kiss the ant. Touch the wrist of the donor. Let your smile rest on the camera a breath longer than natural. She had always been good at learning rooms. What she never learned was how to let them be small. She preferred the kind that measured a person by echoes. Arthur Whitlock Sr. approached me the way polished men approach edges, not head-on. It was adrift with intent. He stopped at a courteous distance and offered a little nod. "We appreciate your presence tonight." The cadence was smooth. In his voice, I heard good schools and successful verdicts. At the corner of his mouth, I saw a man confident that any trouble could be managed in a paragraph. Presence is an easy thing to grant when you think you own the narrative. I let his words sit between us like a folded napkin. He did not extend his hand. Neither did I. His eyes slid past me and found the coordinator. He said something gentle about the timing of the toasts. The coordinator smiled as if a door had been opened for her. When he left, the air remembered its chill. The quartet changed tempo. Something older, something meant to flatter those seated beneath the most light. A pair of guests near me spoke just loudly enough to carry the way people do when they want distance to shrink. I thought her father had passed. That is what she told our table. Poor thing. At least she has this new family. Their sympathy landed like ash, another spoon on another glass. The master of ceremonies announced a series of remarks, and the room turned toward the head table as if on a hinge. The Whitlock crest flashed from a cuff when a jacket sleeve lifted. A camera light blinked red. Someone adjusted a microphone. From the kitchen door came a bloom of heat and the scent of seared fish and lemon. The kitchen was a world that made sense. You put in the work, and food came out. The ballroom was a place where people ate what they had not earned. I traced the stem of the glass again and thought about the first invoice for this night. Venue deposit, then decor, then the quartet. Then, each payment measured not only in dollars but in hours swung from rafters and concrete poured at daylight. I thought about all the times I showed the spreadsheet to Lydia. She nodded and said, "It will be beautiful." Then she said one more thing. She said, "Keep the business talk away from the reception. People do not need to know that a construction company paid for a dream." I do not mind being quiet. Quiet is how you hear the truth arrive. The first truth tonight was simple. The man at the head table knew exactly what he was doing. He had allowed the room to believe a story because the story served the room. The second was harder. My daughter had asked for this, not by accident, not from panic, from choice. A server stopped beside me and hesitated. He looked 20. He looked like me at 20 would have looked if someone had polished him and turned down the volume of the world. He asked if he could clear my plate. I told him I had not been served. He looked confused, glanced toward the kitchen, and left with a promise to fix it that would never make it back through that swinging door. I did not want the food anyway. Hunger was not the emptiness I was managing. Near the bar, a small knot of people tilted their heads toward a phone. News moves inside rooms even quicker than out. Maybe a text from a planner to a vendor. Maybe a familiar name seen where it should not be. My own phone face down on the linen pulsed once. I did not turn it over. Messages can wait when a man has already decided what his next sentence will be. The head planner lifted her hand to get my attention from across the room. I watched her read the name on the envelope she had in her mind. She would come to me when the hour required it. She would use phrases like authorization and final release. She would speak softly so the room would not hear how fragile she was. The microphone cleared its throat. Arthur Whitlock Sr. rose. He thanked everyone for honoring family and tradition. He spoke about character as if it were a centerpiece on the table. He turned to the silver-haired stranger beside my daughter and addressed him with warmth that felt practiced. He said words about fatherhood and an example. People love a script that lets them keep eating. The applause swelled again, full and empty at the same time. I let it wash up against table 9 and break there. I counted to 5 the way you do when you need your hands to open and not clench. I placed my fingertips against the envelope once more and felt the edge like a plumb line. Justice does not always arrive with a door kicked in. Sometimes it stands up slowly at the back of the room and waits for the right light. The spoon touched glass again. The sound carried through the chandeliers bright and precise. The quartet drew a breath. My chair made a soft sound against the floor. I did not rush. I did not look at the head table. I watched the light slide down the side of my glass and settle in the base like a small moon. When I stood, nobody noticed at first. That is the privilege of being invisible. It lets you choose the moment you appear. I stepped into the aisle and the kitchen door breathed warm air across my shoulder. I could feel the room's spine lengthen as the next toast waited in the microphone. Somewhere a clock kept time that did not care who was embarrassed and who was adored. 10 o'clock was coming either way. I moved toward it the way you move toward a breaker panel when the house has started to hum wrong. Quiet, certain, ready to put my hand where it mattered. I built homes for strangers, but never built one she wanted to live in. Mornings at our house began with steam rising off a chipped blue mug and a roll of drawings flattening under a salt shaker on the kitchen table. Lydia balanced a spoon on the rim of her cereal bowl and traced my pencil with her eyes as if lines could hum. I would square the paper with the table edge and talk through the plan the way other fathers recited batting averages. Here, the entry here, the load path here, the way light will move when January comes. She nodded like a foreman in pajamas. When she was little, she liked to slide her finger along the stair stringer I sketched and stage tiny plastic horses on the landing. Before school, I tied her shoes and brushed sawdust off my jacket, a futile gesture I did anyway. At night, I read to her in a chair that creaked and smelled faintly of cut pine. Sometimes I made up stories about walls that never cracked and roofs that sang when it rained. She would fall asleep with my pencil still behind my ear and a smudge near her temple where she had leaned into my shoulder. After her mother died, the house learned our new rhythm. Coffee, lunch, pail, bus stop, job site, bus stop, homework at the kitchen table beside estimates and receipts. I learned to braid hair the way I learned to tie rebar, not elegant at first, but strong. I burned pancakes and pretended they were a style. Lydia pretended to believe me. We made a chart on the fridge with magnet letters, and I moved a green dot from task to task the way I moved a project through framing and inspection. I kept the foundation of our days level because the rest had to go somewhere. Clients came and went. I built for people who wanted a bay window to catch a river, a porch wide enough for 3 chairs, a kitchen with a view of the oak that had been there before their marriage and would be there after. I shook hands and listened to what the corners did in winter. When the inspector signed off and the lights came on for the first time, I would stand by the panel and watch voltage turn into warmth. Lydia called that my favorite kind of quiet. There is a hush when a plan holds. She grew. 4th grade chorus gave way to middle school science fairs. I cut foam board for her projects and held the flashlight while she hot glued planets to a coat hanger. She labeled Mars with a careless S, and I wrote it again small in the corner, as if spelling could steady an orbit. By high school, the kitchen table belonged to textbooks, and my drawings moved to the truck bed under a tarp that smelled like rain. She practiced debate in the mirror. I practiced tying ties. I never liked how silk shone on me. It felt like someone else's voice. The first time she asked me to park around the corner from school, she tried to make her smile wide enough to hide it. "Dad, you will embarrass me with that truck." It was not a cruel thing, not the way teenagers can be when they swing their newfound weight around. It was soft and scared and honest. I told her what I believed. Embarrassment is cheaper than debt, honey. She rolled her eyes and got out anyway. I watched her cross the lot in a dress she had bought with tips from a weekend job at a bakery. She turned once and wiggled her fingers without looking at me the way you wave to someone you still love, but you hope no one sees. When college came, we printed out the list of deadlines and taped it to the cabinet near the coffee. I filled out the parent piece that asks about income and dependence with the same care I gave to the footing schedule. My hand does not shake on a ladder or a roofline. It shook on those lines, not from fear of numbers, from the sudden frankness of a form that names exactly what you have and what you do not. Lydia wrote essays at the kitchen table, leaning over her laptop, pulling her hair into a knot that never held. She asked me to proofread for commas and left a stack beside my mug. On top was a piece called Lessons in Shelter. My father taught me grit, not grace. The sentence sat there like a nail too bright for the board. I read it again and again until the words lost their edges. I did not argue with the truth in it. I had taught her structure, not finish. I had given her a footing, not a chandelier. I kept that page in the drawer with rubber bands and spare batteries, not as a wound, as a plan. After that, I tried to add a different kind of instruction: how to shake a hand and hold a gaze long enough to be remembered, how to say thank you so people feel you mean it and not because you were taught to, how to stand back from a room and see where its load is. I took her to meetings when I could and let her watch me ask for a fair price. I told her dignity is not quiet and not loud, it is correct. Sometimes she walked out afterward and told me I was too blunt. Sometimes she cried in the truck and said she was tired of smelling like plywood. I drove her home with the windows cracked and the radio low because there are arguments a father must not win. We built a dollhouse together out of leftover plywood and paint that had dried around the lid but could be stirred back to life. She chose a color called morning wheat that looked like clean bread. I let her design a closet bigger than the bedroom and laughed with her at the absurdity. We glued on a porch and she suggested a blue door because blue doors look like forgiveness. I cut tiny stairs and she set a toy book on the landing. When it was done, she whispered a welcome to the air. Years later, I found that house in the attic dusty but square. The stairs still held weight. The blue door still closed perfectly with a click you could feel in your chest. After graduation, she moved 2 states away for a job that made sense on paper. We packed her clothes into tubs and her childhood into a quiet between us. She hugged me at the curb with one of those careful embraces people use when they have already started living somewhere else. On the drive back, I kept the speed sensible and the radio off. The road home felt longer than it had in the morning. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see the square of light on the table where her laptop used to be. The house looked like a body after a good long breath had left it. Text messages became our calendar. She sent pictures of desks and meetings and coffee cups with names spelled wrong in expensive ink. I sent pictures of a roof I knew would last. She invited me up once for a networking thing at a hotel. She said it was business casual, and then she took a beat too long before she added another line. Keep the company talk light. People do not need to know that construction paid for everything. I knew she was trying to be kind to me and to the room at the same time. I wore a jacket that night and put my hands in my pockets so I would not gesture like a man explaining joists. There are people who think Polish is a kind of wisdom. Others know Polish without weight is glare. I tried to teach her both. That grace does not mean pretending a thing is not heavy. It means lifting it without making a show of your back. She listened or she did not, depending on the day. I came home from a job once with a nick in my palm, where a nail had kissed skin instead of wood. The cut was small, but it bled more than it looked like it should. Lydia fussed at me and wrapped it with the kind of authority children practice on cats. "Your hands look tired," she said. I told her, "Hands do not get tired. People do." She shook her head and said that sounded like grit again. I could not find a better answer. I kept building. The company grew 1 referral at a time. I added a second crew and then a third. I learned to let foremen run what I used to insist on doing alone. I kept the same thermos and the same toolbox. New tape measures never feel right. I stuck with the old one until the numbers wore off and I could still see them anyway. Memory has a sound. Mine is the slap of rolled drawings closing. That sound is a hinge between places. I hear it now and the kitchen light goes out and the ballroom light returns. I slide the cap onto a tube that is not in my hands and adjust my tie in a mirror that reflects more people than I can count. The knot sits neat at my throat. My fingers are nicked and clean. Behind me, waiters pass in a stream, careful not to touch a guest, with their sleeves careful to maintain the illusion that food appears because a room deserves it. Craft does not need applause, but it does not deserve burial. I look at myself once more and smooth the seam where fabric meets skin. There is a fine line between pride and noise. I have tried to stand on the quiet side my whole life. Somewhere in the room, a glass sings under a spoon and a voice gathers breath. I rest my palm on the envelope in my jacket like a builder laying his hand on a finished wall. No bow, just pressure and a test for truth. Then I turn away from the mirror and walk back into the music. Old money smells different. It's the scent of people who have never waited for payday. It rides the air alongside lemon oil on banisters and a faint powder from white gloves. It sits in the starch of the linen in the way napkins hold their folds like they were taught not to relax in public. At table 9, my place card leaned against a glass like it did not trust me to remember where I belonged. Servers moved by with hands in cotton wrists, straight the choreography of service done so precisely that it turned human bodies into background. The Whitlocks did not raise their voices. They edited them. Conversations were trimmed to the exact length required to suggest meaning without ever touching it. I watched an elderly aunt tilt her head toward a younger woman and compliment a dress in a tone that had 4 steps down inside it. I watched a pair of men at the bar compare sale dates and vintages like they were discussing tides. Everything was a test you were supposed to fail gracefully. A young man in a tux rested his palm on the back of my chair as he reached for a water glass and said, "By the way you hold that stem, you must know your craftsmanship." It was not quite a question. It was an assignment for a tear. I told him I know what holds and what does not. His smile did not move his eyes. He drifted away to the head table, carrying a plate whose weight did not change his shoulder. Across the room, Lydia's new circle clustered like a formation learned in a rehearsal hall. Hands hovered at elbows, brows lifted in synchronized sympathy. I saw a mother pat a spot beside her as if she were summoning a well-trained dog. This is how certain rooms maintain their temperature. They never sweat. They let other people do it for them. Arthur Whitlock Sr. did not so much approach as permit my part of the room to receive him. He traveled with a small, low-pressure system around his shoulders, a hush that fell 2 beats before he spoke. He let his gaze pause on my tie knot, on my cuffs, on my shoes buffed hard by hands that did not belong to me. Then he offered a civil fraction of a smile, the smallest coin of courtesy. "Fine craftsmanship, Mr." The pause was longer than etiquette demanded. It dangled me over a category. "Cole," I said. "Same name on your daughter-in-law's contracts." He absorbed that sentence like a man takes a pill he does not like the taste of. You can watch power do math behind someone's pupils. He recovered with a smoothness earned by years of depositions. "A pleasure, Mr. Cole. We appreciate what you and your team have done in bringing all this together." He let the word team do the quiet demotion. "Technical staff, a neat desk drawer to file me in." I looked at his gloves. Not actual gloves, just the idea of them. The whiteness in his gestures that reminded you he did not carry boxes. The room around us pretended not to watch. He adjusted a cuff, gave me a patient father smile he probably practiced for juries, and tipped his chin in the direction of the lighting rig over the dance floor. We noticed a slight flicker near the far chandelier earlier. Perhaps you or someone on your crew could have a look before the first dance. The sentence floated like a silk scarf. It would land exactly where he meant unless you had hands enough to push the air back. "Speak to Maggie Harper," I said. "She keeps the timeline. She knows which switches belong to me and which to you." The smallest hitch in his posture gone so fast you could say the light had done it, not the man. He was trained to handle insoluble information. He gave me a gracious nod that let both of us save the room some energy. Then he shifted that low-pressure circle toward the stage. The people near us softened with relief, as if a potential complication had been managed with taste. A woman in a pearl strand collar leaned in just enough to let me hear the shape of her judgment. "Lydia is fortunate." Then she retreated as if the words had been a favor. I let them pass like a draft at a door. Luck has a volume in this place. It is always barely audible, so you cannot claim you were insulted. The band slipped into a different number, something with a brushed snare and a melody that had been expensive once and then forgiven for aging. The change in song was the kind of cue people here understood without looking up. Course corrected, mood-adjusted, profile aligned. I brought the glass to my lip and watched the light carry itself along the arc of crystal. A room like this likes to believe it owns light. But light does not remember names. It remembers angles. A young Whitlock with a lapel pin and a jaw he probably inherited along with a boat stopped at the edge of my table. His voice was used to carry in courtrooms. He dialed it down to the soft power setting for me. "You are with the setup, correct?" He made it kind, made it a courtesy to include me in his management of the evening. I told him I am with the signature. He blinked once as if a draft had found his eye. He nodded like a man pretending to understand a trade he had never learned, and moved on before comprehension could embarrass him. The head table threw off a glow that does not come from electricity. It comes from expectation. Lydia stood inside it like a candle in a hurricane glass protected from the wind that makes other people shiver. She looked great. I will not take that away from her. Beauty was a craft she had studied. Head slightly turned, shoulder set to make the dress's line carry the eye where the camera wanted it to go. She laughed with her mouth and dampened it with her eyes when the joke was not generous. She was doing the work of a room that pays in invitations. Maggie Harper found me with the economy of a person who does not repeat steps. "Mr. Cole, the lighting cue for the couple's entrance is on standby." She kept her voice pitched low, not secretive, just efficient. I nodded. Her eyes flicked to the head table and then to my jacket pocket as if she could see the shape of the envelope through the fabric. She did not ask a question about it. Professionals do not ask questions they do not need to carry. She tapped her tablet and went 3 degrees left out of the current before it had to bend around her. If you listen long enough in a place like this, you can hear the doctrine running under the music. It says hierarchy is polite. It says kindness is an accent you put on direction. It says people born already seated should be thanked for lifting a finger. It says fathers who build things can be moved out of the picture if the picture needs cleaner lines. The Whitlock crest flashed again from a cufflink. I let my eyes follow its reflection into the bowl of my glass. You can tell a lot about a room by what it chooses to reflect. Here the reflections were always of themselves. Arthur Sr. returned as the MC tested the microphone with a practiced breath. He offered me his hand this time. I took it because there is dignity in balance. His palm was cool and completely uncalloused, a map with no roads. He smiled the way a verdict smiles. "We are grateful, Mr. Cole. Everything appears seamless." That word landed with the intent of a compliment and the work of an eraser. Seamless means no one has to think about how it was joined. Seams hold or they do not. When they do, you do not see the hours. When they do not, you do not see anything else. He tried again with the filing. "Your outfit seems excellent. Technical staff who take pride in their craft are hard to find these days." He wanted to be generous and hierarchical at once. It is a trick men in his position learn to do automatically. I said it as gently as I could because I am not here to embarrass anyone except perhaps the next sentence. Cole Construction and Design is not an outfit. It is my name. It is on every agreement that has kept this room from becoming a dark, quiet warehouse. He did that tiny pause again, that administrative hold in a man's operating system when a different file appears than the one he clicked. Then he gave me the nod that keeps worlds from touching and excused himself in the kind of way only people in charge manage to present as polite instead of final. The music changed. A standard became a waltz. The band leader did it with a small hand motion I recognized from job sites where time matters. I turned the glass a quarter turn and let the chandelier scatter itself across the surface. Behind it, the thinnest hairline crack at the base of a sconce cast a shadow no one else would ever see unless they knew where to stand. Imperfections have their own schedule. My fingers found the table 9 card and laid it flat, as if to stop it from slipping. Titles in this room were assigned the way linen is chosen by weight and by how it drapes. I could live with that for one night. But linen is not a contract. Names on paper are not opinions. They are switches. The band held the last bar of the waltz like a breath. The MC lifted his arm. The chatter tilted toward silence. I set the glass down and watched the light settle with it. Class has nothing to do with who carries plates and who lifts toasts. It shows up in how you treat the person who can turn the room on or cut it clean. I rested my hand against the inside pocket and felt the envelope like a beam true to plumb. Somewhere near the back, a door swung and a thin stripe of kitchen brightness slid into the ballroom, then vanished again quick as a thought. Every fairy tale has an invoice at the end. I keep the paper where it belongs, in a leather envelope that holds like a palm and smells faintly of dye and rain. On nights like this, it rides in my inside pocket, flat and patient, a second heartbeat beneath cloth. The ballroom hums, but the numbers keep their own weather. Before there were chandeliers and a quartet, there was a desk lamp in my office and the quiet of 6 in the morning. I opened an email from Harper Events and watched the thread climb backward through weeks. Subject lines stacked like joists. Venue reservation confirmation, floral mock-up revision, stage lighting cue approval. Each message bore the same small courtesy in the header. Copied to Lydia Cole. I let my finger rest on that line until the skin warmed the glass. Maggie asked me once in a walkthrough at the estate, standing under a ceiling medallion the size of a manhole, if I always read the fine print, Mr. Cole. Only when I am paying $500,000. She smiled because she respects a lever when she sees one. She guided me to a banquette and laid out the contract suite with a caterer's neatness. Each agreement had its shape, its load, its points that carried more than they looked like they could. I traced the signature line with my eye and not with my pen. There is a difference between wanting a thing done and making it so. I signed the venue reservation first. The ink made its tiny sound not quite a scratch, more like a thread catching. Under the totals, a line of type was in a smaller font. Final payment is subject to client approval. The phrase was calm, almost polite. It had teeth. The florist's agreement came next, bundled with a rendering that made the ballroom look like a garden that had never known weather. I wrote checks that would become peonies and orchids and the color white in 20 soft opinions. Then the quartet. Then the staging vendor who never looks like much until the photographs reveal how a floor decides whether people feel like moving. Each time I kept the angle of the pen exact and the pressure steady. I signed it, I wired it. I built it. At the bank, the business manager leaned across the counter the way careful people do when they do not want to put weight on a statement. "This is a large outgoing schedule, Mr. Cole. Do you want to stagger?" I told her what nights need. They need clarity. We set the dates. We set the limits. We set the last gate for 10 o'clock on the evening itself. She tapped the schedule with a red stamp that thumped like a muted drum. Approved. The mark dried into the paper like certainty. I took a picture of the stamp and sent it to Alan. He called on the speaker as I cleaned graphite from under my nails with the corner of a rag. "I like your clause," he said. "It reads simply." Which is to say, it reads strongly. He offered to fly in anyway. I told him I did not plan to litigate a wedding. I planned to be there. He told me that it was often the same thing, only faster. Invoice after invoice arrived and went to their places like boards in a frame. Furniture rentals, glassware upgrades, a small addendum for a late request on monogrammed napkins that would be thrown away by midnight. I did not argue. I pick my battles with the same care I pick lumber. Straight grain where it has to be seen. A knot does not matter if you know where the load will never touch. The day the lighting contractor wrote to confirm the rigging plan, I walked to the window with my phone and looked at the sky. A clean blue with a tilt of winter left in it. He had attached a sheet that maps circuits and loads. I can read those the way other men read box scores. I saw the breaker configuration. I saw the extra feed to handle the band. I saw the place where a master switch sits, not for drama, for safety, but switches do not care why they exist. They care about flow and stoppage in human hands. Lydia came by the office that afternoon wearing a jacket the color of ripe pears. She stood by the framed permit from my first solo project and smiled like she had always known I would hang it there. She looked at the stack of checks waiting for the courier. "You are generous, Dad." The word felt like a napkin folded over a stain. I said nothing because sometimes a father's answers make a child's choices heavier. She touched the leather envelope with 2 fingers and then pulled her hand back like she had felt its temperature. Night pulls the present up from memory like a nail from old wood. Back in the ballroom, the quartet finishes a number and breathes together. I slide the envelope a 1/4 inch to feel its edge. The red bank stamp lives in there with the rest of my quiet. The planner moves like a metronome around the perimeter. Vendors hover in the hum of wait and see. The head table glows as if an electrician hit a sunrise inside the linen. Another email surfaced in my mind, not because of its cost, but because of its tone. The social register requested a detail sheet for publication, names of families, brands, a list of champagne labels. There was a blank field for benefactors. Maggie asked whether I wanted that line to list Cole Construction and Design. Lydia answered first before I could get to it. "Please leave that line empty." The phrase was tidy. It removed me without making a sound. I opened my notebook across my thigh now and let my thumb find a page where I had written only 3 words in the space where figures usually go. Approval at close. That was not for Maggie or Alan or the bank. That was for me. A reminder that the last act of any honest builder is not payment. It is an inspection. You look. You measure what cannot be measured. You listen for a hum that should not be there. You do not sign until the thing stands on its own. Later, in a warehouse office that smells of plywood and hot printers, the warehouse clerk had asked me if we planned to keep a contingency. "Do you want a holdback?" I told him I wanted leverage placed where it belongs. He slid a file across to me in a folder the color of tired cherries. I closed it when we were done, and the sound of the clasp was exact. It is a small music paper that is made when it agrees. In the ballroom now, a server pours wine and the bottle hums against the rim. Maggie checks a timestamp on her tablet. "We will be ready for introductions in 3. She glances not at me, but at the jacket at the place where the envelope makes a faint flatness. A good manager knows the location of power even when she does not name it. She nods once, an approving look reserved for correct joinery. A moment returns from a month ago. The venue's finance officer sat with us in a room with a window that framed the river look framed. He wore a tie with little anchors on it and spoke in a tone that meant he had never had to convince anyone of bad news. "Do you always read the fine print, Mr. Cole?" I told him. "I read what carries weight. That clause protects both of us. It keeps the evening honest." He nodded in the rhythm of a person who knew we would be fine because people like us always are. I did not correct him. I simply put my initials beside the clause that put the last word in the right mouth. I returned my phone face down to the linen. A new message had arrived while I was thinking. Final payment authorization request will be issued at 9:58. 2 minutes to consider. 2 minutes is the right amount of time for a truth that has already been decided. Somewhere in the hall, a door whispers closed. The world on the other side is ovens and heat and knives that do what they are told. The world on this side is applause and story and names printed on a card. I lift the envelope and feel the weight shift in my hand. People say money moves things. It does, but not like this. This is not the shove of a shoulder, this is the placement of a pin. I slide the papers half out and look at the line where my name curls into its last letter. A signature is a bridge. It connects intent to consequence. Mine has carried more weight than most of my beams. I let the papers settle back. The leather closes with a soft mouth sound. The file is shut. The saxophone slides back in, sweet and confident, as if it had been waiting outside the door for permission to enter. I set the envelope down in my lap and breathe once the way you do before you test a finished wall with the heel of your hand. Power does not live in how much you spend. It lives when you say yes, and when you say no. Nothing's louder than pretending you don't see your own father. It has a frequency you feel in the ribs before you hear it, a pressure that pushes you a step back without laying a hand on you. Lydia crossed the ballroom in a slow ribbon of satin and light veil falling against her shoulders, like a calm the room believed in. She looked past me the way you look past a window at night when you do not want to catch your own reflection. I was background. I was a muted presence seated where the kitchen door exhales. The applause went up for someone else's story and came down on mine like dust. I kept my palm cupped around the stem of a glass until the warmth from my skin fogged a crescent into the bowl. My face appeared there as a rivered reflection, a half-citizen of the evening. In that curved mirror, I watched Lydia's profile tilt toward a camera. The tiny rhinestones in her ear caught a spark and held it. Her veil moved when she laughed and settled again with a patient weight, as if it had been taught how to make evidence disappear. 2 women in silk passed close enough for perfume to write a small paragraph in the air. One lowered her voice to the kind of whisper you mean other people to hear. Families are complicated. The other answered with a nod that had 7 layers of meaning and no friction. I let the sentences go. There is work you do and work you refuse. I was refusing the job of picking up what did not belong to me. The phone in my pocket tapped my leg once. Not a ring, just the little pulse that says a decision is standing at the door with its hand raised. I slid the screen awake with my thumb under the linen's edge. Her name sat above a single line. Please do not tell anyone you are in construction. The letters were neat and calm and heavier than they looked. I read them twice, and then a third time the way you read a measurement you cannot afford to get wrong. I did not write back. Silence can be a hammer when you hold it by the right end. I lifted my eyes and found her across the room. The planner was turning her gently toward the next cluster of congratulations. She was good at this new choreography at touching wrists and tilting her chin so the light loved her. When she glanced toward my corner, the glance slid over me the way rain slides off a roof treated with a product designed to keep it from soaking in. It was not cruelty. Cruelty would have been warmer. This was a cool choice made weeks ago and practiced until it looked natural. My chair creaked a little when I stood. I moved with the easy slowness of a man who has carried an armoire through a doorway without scratching the jamb. I stepped into a lane between tables and waited where the servers did not need to adjust their path. Lydia came by with 2 bridesmaids who had rehearsed their joy. She saw me the way a person sees a caution cone. She altered her steps by an inch and then decided not to. I spoke softly so it would land where it belonged. You wanted me invisible. I learned fast. Her mouth parted and then shut on whatever the prettier sentence would have been. Dad, it is not like that. It is exactly like that. Her eyes searched my face for a tone she could accept and not have to carry. She found none. She placed her hand on my sleeve in the careful way a person touches something that might leave a mark and leaned close enough for a secret the room would forgive. This is my night. Please. The piece was a piece tied around a box that did not change what was inside. She turned back into the weather of voices that always know where it is going. I returned to table 9. A busser cleared an empty glass from a chair 2 seats away with the grace of a person who has practiced not being seen. I wanted to thank him for the lesson. The quartet eased into a softer piece, and then the tempo changed under my skin before I could name the song. The rhythm shifted to a waltz with brushed cymbals like quiet rain. The room understood the cue as a body. People arranged themselves without speaking. That new time signature folded the air at the edges of my lungs. I let the waltz carry me toward the doors. The corridor to the terrace was a narrow inhale. At the threshold, a curtain of night air lifted and fell, touched by river and magnolia and something faintly metallic that always lives near kitchens. Outside, the balustrade held the day's heat held and gave it back through my jacket. Out beyond the trees, a freight horn laid down a long line of sound you could fold your thoughts along. It was the first honest note of the evening. From here, the ballroom looked like a painting that had been varnished too brightly. The chandeliers performed innocence. Inside them, the bulbs did their simple job and asked for nothing. My hands found the stone rail and stayed there until the grit spoke up against my skin. I thought of the dollhouse with the blue door and the way its little latch clicked like confidence. I thought of Lydia at that kitchen table with a smudge of pencil on her cheek, bent over an essay she believed would unspool a future where she never had to smell plywood again. My father taught me grit, not grace. She wrote it as a fact and not an accusation. I had read it as both. The waltz inside turned itself like a clock. I watched couples float along a path that someone had measured down to inches. Lydia passed through a pool of light, and for a second the veil lit white across her shoulders and then went dim. A server cut across the far end of the room with a tray high and held like a roof. The planner received a message in her earbud and nodded toward the bandleader. The bandleader touched 2 fingers to his temple and lifted his chin with the precise economy of an electrician pointing at the right breaker. Even grace is a craft when it holds. My phone buzzed again. A second message from Lydia arrived without apology. Do not mention the company. People will not understand. People is a soft word used when you are afraid to say, I. I let the screen dim. The blue of the night settled back where it belonged. I was not angry in the way rooms expect men to be angry. I have spent a life choosing where to put force. I was placing mine on a line of paper that would ask only for a pen, and even then, only if the truth had earned it. Behind me, the doors opened and closed with guests blowing cool air around conversations. A young cousin stepped out to take a call and laughed quietly into her palm. A pair of elders compared aches as if reading recipes. No one noticed the man at the rail until a server who had the habit of caring offered me a glass of water without asking if I wanted it. I took it and thanked him and watched how the surface trembled, then smoothed in my hand. Balance is a small piece you can practice. Inside, the waltz reached its last turn. The applause that followed sounded soft and obedient, the way you clap for a performance you paid for. I could have stayed at the rail until the breeze put me back together. But a clock had been set in another room, and I had chosen to be in that room when it struck. I set the water down, and the ring it left on the stone looked like a seal. I pressed my thumb into it for the simple satisfaction of leaving a mark somewhere no one would see. I stepped back through the doors. The temperature change pressed against my skin like a hand reminding me where I was. The light folded over me again and tried to make me part of its idea. The planner caught my eye and then let it go as if she respected gravity. At my table, the place card leaned just where I left it. I did not sit. I smoothed my tie with 2 fingers and felt the edge of the envelope against my ribs, cool and faithful. Immediacy and patience can share a pocket when you build them right. Music shifted once more. The bandleader lifted a finger and the saxophone answered with a line that curled like ribbon and tied itself into a bow you could untie with a tug. I stood and breathed in sync with the measure. Plan first, then move. Silence is not surrender when it is chosen. It is the first clean board you lay across an opening so the next 2 have something true to meet. Control is not loud. It is the name on the last check. I looked at my watch and watched the second hand carry itself around the dial like a man who knows exactly how many steps are left before a door. 9:41. The band filled the room with something smooth that tried to sand the edges off the hour. The chandeliers hummed in their metal throats. I felt the leather envelope against my ribs unsealed, quiet, as a kept promise. Maggie passed by in a line that never broke its shape. Her tablet lit her face for a blink. She stopped just long enough to let calm reach me. We are lined up for introductions on the hour. She did not ask if the evening would land where the timeline wanted it. Professionals spend their questions carefully. I nodded once. That was all the permission she needed to keep the clock where it was. 9:45. A trio of guests at the bar compared dates on bottles the way hobbyists compare scars. A waiter lifted a tray and balanced it like a spirit level. Benjamin lifted Lydia's hand and kissed the air above it. Arthur watched them the way a foreman watches a crane, proud of the weight it can carry as long as it obeys. I stepped into the corridor that led to a side office the staff used for breath. The air there was honest and a few degrees cooler. Alan was already standing at a small table that had a lamp with a tired shade. His briefcase sat open like a mouth waiting for speech. He did not waste my time with a story. "You sure about this?" "Ethan, I do not start fires. I turn off the power." He slid a thin packet toward me. The paper had that rich stiffness that tells you it remembers being a tree. Notice of suspension with supporting clause highlighted. He tapped the corner with 2 fingers. "If you do nothing, time will do the rest. If you do this, it will be cleaner." I picked up my pen and felt the cap resist for a heartbeat. The click when it let go was small and correct. I did not sign. Not yet. I placed the pen down parallel to the edge of the file and pressed my palm over the envelope in my jacket to settle it. Alan watched the way a doctor watches a heart monitor when the numbers are steady but the patient has not said how he feels. 9:48. The hallway woke with a run of footsteps and the murmur of staff calling tables to order. The lamp buzzed. In the ballroom, someone tested a microphone with the softest breath. I could hear the band leader count a measure under his voice. 1, 2, 3, and... Alan looked toward the door and then back at me. He lowered his voice, but not his authority. "You built a hinge into tonight. Hinge it whichever way is true." Benjamin's laugh found its way from the main room into the hallway. Lydia's voice floated with its sweetly practiced the right amount of joy for people who expect to feel included. I could picture the scene without looking. Her veil pressed, her hand tilted. Arthur's satisfied scan for compliance at the edges. I let the second hand touch the top of the dial before I moved. The hallway carried us back to the ballroom where everything glittered as if nothing heavier than a compliment would ever be dropped. Alan fell in 2 steps behind me, a shadow made of law and quiet. He did not need to stand beside me to do his work. He needed only for me to be exactly who I had been for 30 years. 9:51. Maggie met my eyes across a gap and measured my posture the way I have measured walls. She placed a hand on her earpiece and said nothing, which meant everything was still possible. The planner's assistant placed a small folded card at the corner of the head table and withdrew without looking left or right. The MC rolled his shoulders like a man who has learned to pretend nerves are part of the show. The saxophone slid a ribbon of sound across the floor and tied it around the ankles of the front row. 9:53. My phone woke. Payment portal prepped. 2-minute window near 10. I did not open it. I turned it face down on the linen and set 2 fingers on it as if it were a skittish tool that might fall. Lydia crossed the room to the ladies' lounge with 2 friends attached by invisible ribbon. As she passed, her perfume picked up the memory of the magnolia outside and made it seem like something bought. She glanced once toward the staff corridor and then away, a reflex more than a thought. She believed the next 10 minutes belonged to her. She was not entirely wrong. They belonged to what she had chosen. 9:55. Arthur moved to the stage with the replicable grace of a man who has done this many times and always gotten his ending. Benjamin pressed his cuff and checked his watch and measured the attention due to a groom. People arranged their faces to be seen approving of something that would photograph well. Alan placed his hand on the back of an empty chair behind me. He did not speak. The weight of his palm on wood was the right kind of company. I lifted the envelope from my jacket and set it on my knee. The leather gave a small breath as it bent. I slipped the papers half out, and there it was again, my name at the right angle, the line that ties intent to outcome. I could hear the tick inside the watch on my wrist. A quiet hunter that does not care who is prey and who is host. 9:57. Maggie touched the band leader's sleeve and made a circle in the air with her finger. He nodded once. The music softened exactly 1 degree. Glasses settled on linen. Conversations found their commas. From somewhere near the kitchen, a tray clinked in a way that said, "Hurry," without panic. 9:58. The phone woke itself and offered a green button and a red one. The language was friendly. Confirm or hold. The two words looked equal. They were not. I let a breath find the bottom of my lungs and placed my forefinger over the choice. Alan did not look. He was looking away on purpose because respect learns where to stand. I did not touch either button. I set the phone back down. To wait is to act when time is one of your tools. 9:59. I pressed the pen cap back on and felt the tiny click close the possibility of signing anything early. I gathered the suspension notice by its edge and slid it back into Alan's file without creasing it. Not yet. Not if. When. The moment would tell me whether the evening had met inspection. You do not mark it complete while the concrete is still wet. 10 o'clock began like a coastline more than a line. There is a swell before a wave hits. The MC stepped forward. The lights edged brighter as if a hand had turned a dimmer with a gentle authority. People took their cue and turned their bodies toward the stage. The quartet reached the end of a phrase and left the smallest silence suspended over the center of the room, a bead of water waiting to fall. Maggie's eyes were on me and then not. She had 100 small engines to keep running at once. She trusted that the largest engine would tell her what kind of night this was. Alan straightened his jacket and let his hand fall back to his side. He was done arranging tools. The work would either require them or not. The watch on my wrist kept talking. The sound was nothing like a drum. It was more like a wire you have tightened just enough to sing along a beam. The green button on the phone dimmed and brightened in a slow breath. The chandeliers held steady. The saxophone rested its reed on a note that tasted like copper in the back of my mouth. When the MC spoke, the first word was smooth. The second had a tremor that only people who build for a living would hear. I lifted my eyes from the envelope and let the room come into focus, one deliberate foot at a time. Control is not the volume of your voice. It is the right to say enough when the measure asks you to keep playing. The tick carried on. The music thinned for a heartbeat, then fell to a hush so precise the air itself felt wired. The climax was no longer approaching. It had entered the room and taken a seat without announcing itself. He raised his glass to a man who never changed a single light bulb for her. The band thinned to a hush that made the chandeliers sound like they were breathing. Arthur stood with the calm of a man used to verdicts. His cuff caught a stripe of light and sent it across the room like a blade laid flat. People turned toward him as if pulled by the same string. The microphone warmed in his hand. He did not clear his throat. He did not need to. He was already amplified. To her father, the man of dignity and grace. The words floated across linen and crystal and landed where he intended. Near me, glasses lifted and touched. The tap of rim on rim moved through the room like rain beginning on a roof. Lydia looked at the silver-haired figure seated at her right and placed her palm over his knuckles as though she had always known him. The stranger accepted the honor with a modest dip of his head. His humility had a shine to it. I felt the light find my face and stay there. It was not a spotlight. It was the kind of steady glow that exposes grain. I lifted my glass so my fingers had something to do other than count the seconds. A single drop slipped over the rim and marked my tie like a dot at the end of a sentence that had taken years to write. Funny. I taught her both. Alan made no sound behind me. A still shape made of patience and paper. Maggie came to rest 2 paces off my shoulder, half in the shadow of a pillar. She kept her voice low and aimed at the space between us the way good news should be delivered and bad news should begin. Sir Payment is still pending. I did not look at her. I let the words sit in the air and cool. She waited the exact time a professional gives a decision. Its dignity then moved away without leaving a seam. Control is a language. She spoke it fluently. Arthur continued the cadence measured for cameras and reputation. He praised the values that shaped Lydia. He spoke about honor like it was a family heirloom that could be handed from one man to another if you said it sweet enough. The band held a chord that made everything bruise-colored for a measure. At the head table, Benjamin lifted his glass high and fixed his expression in that agreeable shape men wear when the future is being photographed. The silver-haired man looked grateful at the floor. If you did not know how a room is built, you would have believed him. I did not check my watch. Time had moved into the room and taken a chair. I could feel it behind the skin on my wrist, a steady ticking that did not ask permission. The phone lay face down where I had left it quiet as a resting tool. The leather envelope settled against my ribs when I breathed. The paper inside did what paper does when it has already decided. It waited. The toast pushed on. People smiled with their mouths and their cheeks agreed a moment later. Even the servers slowed to let courtesy glide across their backs. Lydia's eyes shone in that way that is half joy and half survival under light. When she turned her head, the veil slid and settled again like a whisper closing a door. The room swayed with the speech as if it were a waltz. Words about character, phrases about family, a patina of gratitude that made everyone feel correct. The lie was not loud. That is how it survives. It asks to be applauded, and no one wants to be the first to put down their hands. I looked at the wine drop drying into my tie and thought about the stains you decide to leave. Some marks are not mistakes. They are records. I let my thumb rest on the spot until the fabric warmed, and then I took it away. The light stayed with me. Perhaps it had recognized its own work in a different ceiling. A guest leaned sideways across the aisle to catch my eye with a kindness that had edges. "You must be proud, sir." I nodded once. Pride is a room with a door you open for yourself. No one can escort you in. Arthur lifted his glass a fraction higher to land the final line of his blessing. He gave the room a pause to teach it where to clap. The pause lasted exactly long enough to feel like permission, and not long enough to invite thought. He finished clean. Applause rose on cue, bright and obedient. The sound had no weight. It floated. The microphone gave a small whine, the kind that makes people flinch before they know they are moving. A soft feedback curled up from the floor as if the sound system itself had doubts. Heads turned by the reflex that comes when a noise admits that everything is not seamless. In that ripple of attention, the imaginary camera that lives in every ballroom decided it needed a different shape. It swung off the head table and came toward the corner where a man in a dark suit held still enough to be mistaken for furniture until the room remembered chairs do not sign contracts. My face was warm, not from anger, from physics. A fixture had found a human plane and used it. I let the glass touch the linen and placed my hands flat beside the plate. The weight of my palms steadied the table for reasons that had nothing to do with balance. Across the way, Arthur watched his result with the satisfied look of a builder admiring trim. He had placed each word and counted on gravity. He had not planned for a hinge. Maggie's eyes brushed mine from across the space between tables. The look lasted less than a beat and said more than a page. Ready if needed, standing down if not. I gave her the smallest nod a man can give and still have it count. She left her post with that light step people earn by carrying heavy things well. Behind my shoulder, Alan breathed once. No words. The kind of exhale you hear in a courtroom when everyone accepts the next page is not blank. He shifted his weight to tell me he was exactly where he should be and nowhere else. Benjamin set his glass down wrong, and the base kissed the rim of a plate with a dull note. His smile worked to keep him from slipping. Lydia kept her profile composed for the people who had paid to feel included. The silver-haired man settled deeper into his picture, a portrait learning to be a person and not quite getting there. He raised his glass again for a final flourish that a younger man would have overplayed. To her father, the man of dignity and grace. A second time softer now the way you bless a thing and close the book. Funny, I taught her both. I did not say it for the room. I said it to hear how it sounded inside my own chest. The words landed there and held. The applause followed like obedient weather. A pair of glasses collided near the bar, and one of them chipped. The crack held a thin white line in the bowl that caught the light and made it look like the glass was smiling too wide. The microphone breathed again, a little animal clearing its throat. Somewhere a lighting tech trimmed a dimmer by a hair, and the warmth on my face shifted from summit to slope. The bandleader spread two fingers, and the rhythm slid beneath the chatter like a river under ice. The imaginary camera finished its sweep and came to rest on an angle that gave the room what it wanted. Hero, bride, crest. The mistake is a long way back. I stood. The chair whispered across the floor. No one heard it until the sound joined the feedback and made a sentence. The air made space the way people make space when a breaker is about to be thrown. The next breath did not belong to the toast. It belonged to the truth waiting at the edge of a microphone that had just proved it could speak without being invited. My name's on every contract and I'm still breathing. I stepped into the wash of the chandeliers and set my hand on the microphone. The room gave me its face before it gave me its ears. I let both arrive. My voice was steady. It carried the way a beam carries when you set it true. My name is Ethan Cole. I am Lydia's father. I am the client of record for this evening. Silence found a chair. The band let a note go and did not pick it up again. I lifted the leather envelope and laid it on the edge of the stage so everyone could see exactly where gravity lived. You heard a fine story. Now you will hear the paper I drew out the first contract. The letters were small and patient. Final payment is subject to client approval. The clause sat there like a lock that never bragged about the key it held. Alan stood to my left, unimportant to the room until the room needed him. He had the notice ready without waving it. Arthur smiled from the head table in that way people smile when a meeting is about to become an appointment. Benjamin adjusted his cuff. Lydia did not move. Even her veil held still. I am withholding approval. The final transfer of $290,000 will not be authorized. The air changed shape. It did not crash. It shifted. People who had practiced not reacting forgot for a second what they were practicing. A murmur rose and broke against linen like small surf. A floor captain took 2 steps toward the stage with professional courage. Sir, you cannot stop the service. You are right, I can end it. I lifted my phone. The portal glowed green, waiting red, waiting. I let the room see it, and then I let it see the screen go dark in my palm. Action through stillness. A harder craft than most. My name appears on every agreement that keeps this room lit. Venue, catering, music, floral, staging. Those names were not printed. They were earned. I signed them. I wired them. I built the night that has made you comfortable. Maggie was already moving ear to her radio, not frantic exact. Her voice carried just enough. Service has entered hold. Await direction. Teams pause and secure. She did not look at me because respect can operate without eye contact. Arthur rose with a careful dignity. His voice landed in the space between us. Mr. Cole, please, let us discuss this privately. There is no need to create a scene. I did not lift my voice. The scene was already here. You invited it when you told a room my life had ended while you dined under my name. Alan placed the notice on the podium like a mechanic setting down a tool. He did not perform it. He simply allowed it to exist. If you require documentation, the suspension is here. The clause is highlighted. The signatures are in order. A photographer near the back lowered his camera by inches and then raised it again. You can always tell when a lens decides truth is more valuable than polite. I picked up the checkbook that had been a bridge and turned it into a door. The cover creaked. The page had a sheen that made it look stronger than paper. It was not. I held it up so the people at the far tables could see what a decision looks like when it wears ink. The tear sounded bigger than the paper. It went through crystal and conversation and landed in the part of the ear that does not forget. A second tear followed. The pieces lay in my hand like white feathers that had remembered they were not meant for flight. Light shivered across the chandeliers. Not a failure, a flicker. A reminder that power is a living thing. The band did what a good band does when the measure changes. They stopped together. Sound fell away until only breathing remained. A room of lungs remembering their job. Arthur tried again, softer. There will be consequences, Mr. Cole. There already are. They began when you named a stranger father and asked my daughter to nod. Lydia stood. She swayed not from weight but from the idea that holding still would make time reverse. Her mouth opened on a word that might have been please. It did not arrive. She looked at me with the same eyes that once searched a gym for one face and found it. I did not look away. I could not give her a lie to lean on. A server near the bar began collecting untouched plates with the efficiency of a man protecting a company. He kept his steps neat. Maggie's team guided staff toward exits with the grace of a crew bringing a ship through fog. No shouting, no panic. Contracts are written in the language they prefer. Action. Benjamin moved as if to cross the floor, then looked to Arthur for permission, then remembered he was a groom and not an attorney, and stayed where the photograph said he belonged. He pressed both hands to the tablecloth like a man feeling for a stud in a wall he did not build. I slid the torn check pieces into the envelope, then set the envelope back against my chest. The gesture was not dramatic. It was storage. I gave the microphone one more sentence. When respect is not part of the service ends. We will settle what is owed by the letter, not by the story. A hush answered. No agreement. Not revolt. Just a human reset when a lie runs out of room. The chandeliers calmed. The glassware settled. Somebody exhaled for the first time in a minute, and the sound traveled like wind through winter grass. The floor captain stood again, less sure now, but still brave. "Sir, what about the cake and the send-off?" "The contract we signed covers occupancy until 10. Use the room. Pack safely. No further service will be rendered under my authorization." He absorbed it with a small nod that had more respect in it than most of the night had granted. He turned and began to make order in the right direction. Arthur's jaw settled into a line he probably used when juries turned stubborn. He looked across the tables and tried to gather allies with his eyes. Eyes did not move. People studied the cut of their napkins. Lessons have weight. No one rushed to lift this one for him. Lydia's voice finally found its way up. "Dad, do not do this, I already did. And I did not do it to you. I did it for the thing that made you and me a family." She closed her hand around the back of her chair and looked very small, standing inside a dress that had been made to make her large. She nodded once, not at me. At something old that lives in a person and does not learn language from rooms like this. Maggie raised her palm to the band. The bandleader acknowledged with 2 fingers. The saxophone rested in its stand. Silence did not feel empty. It felt exact. I took a step back from the microphone and let it breathe without me. Alan gathered the notice and slid it home. We did not rush. Climax does not require running. The light steadied. A single glass cracked near the bar as if a small truth had reached its capacity and decided to change form. No one laughed. A few people blinked like coming out of a bright movie into dusk. I left the stage the way I climbed it. One measured step at a time. The leather carried the torn paper and the line with my name. I did not look left or right. I knew where the door was. I knew where the breaker lived. I knew when enough was the right word. Behind me the music did not resume. The night exhaled, and you could hear the shape of a room that would remember this hour, whether anyone wrote about it or not. You would be amazed at how quiet a $1 million room becomes when power is cut. It did not go black. Safety circuits held. The chandeliers sighed too low and steadied a winter version of their former selves. The band fell to silence like a sheet dropped from a line. Voices did not rise. They thinned. You could feel sound get pulled out of the space as if a draft had found a cracked pane and made use of it. Maggie moved first. Service on hold. Team secure. Her voice carried its own order. Plates stopped mid-trip and reversed. Trays lowered. Torches snuffed. In the dim, the white of Lydia's dress became a lantern with no wick. She stood inside it like someone who had prepared for brightness and found herself in weather. Arthur pushed back his chair with a noise that wanted to be law. "You humiliated us." "No, you did." The words did not need volume. They had weight. He heard it. He swallowed. Benjamin rose halfway and then thought better. His eyes flicked to the photographer near the back and then to the wall where the crest hung. His hands flattened on the tablecloth to stop their small shake. A dozen phones blinked awake. Little storms of light. A girl in a green dress hid her camera at hip level and filmed in a line that would make the edit later. A man near the doors lifted his device brazenly, already arranging the caption in his mind. The lens found me then. Lydia, then Arthur's jaw, then the torn paper in my hand, now folded back into leather. People like to record what they are glad they did not decide. A floor captain approached with care the way you approach a breaker that has just been thrown. "Sir, for safety, we will reduce non-essential lighting and close bar service. Do it." He nodded, grateful to be told in a language he understood. He moved through the room and drew down excess. The chandelier's hum softened. The bar back slipped bottles into crates that had waited for this possibility, the way fire extinguishers wait for heat. The doors at the far end opened, and the night came in like a correction. A stripe of river air dragged across linen, and the hair on people's arms rose without permission. Somewhere beyond the trees, a horn lay down a line and kept going. The sound fit the room better than the band had. Honest. Long. Unafraid to finish. Lydia took one step toward me and stopped. Her veil had caught on the chair. She freed it with the gentlest tug, careful not to tear what could be saved. Her mouth formed a word without air. Then she found breath and used it. "Dad, please." I did not look away. I did not add to the injury. I gave her the only thing that did not lie, a stillness that would hold if she needed to lean on it later. Benjamin turned to Arthur and forgot the cameras for a second. "I thought you said it was covered." Arthur's answer arrived without sound. He pressed 2 fingers to his temple and shook his head by the tiniest degree as if to dislodge the evening and drop it where it could be stepped over. A woman in pearls collected her shawl and looked down the line of her own family as if checking attendance at a fire drill. Men near the bar studied the exact grain of the wood as though they could learn something about their own names from it. A boy in a rented suit tried on the expression he thought went with adulthood and failed. Failures have their own mercy. A reporter I recognized from other rooms because reporters watch like carpenters drifted toward Maggie with a notebook half lifted. She shielded with a small motion of her tablet and sent him to the venue office where answers grow slowly, if at all. He accepted the delay because the lens behind him was still eating and would not starve. Arthur found his voice again lower. "You do not understand what you have done. I understand precisely. I withheld approval under a clause your counsel read and initialed. What you misunderstand is price. It is not the same thing as value." He stared at me like a man trying to muscle a door that only opens with a code. Benjamin's smile, the public one, had gone missing. He stood square in his tux and looked for a script on the floor. None offered itself. In the hush, ordinary noises announced themselves. Ice settling in a bucket, a sconce ticking as it cooled, the soft exhale of a guest who did not know they had been holding air since the microphone went live. When sound goes away like that, people see themselves, not in mirrors, in the way their shoulders sit under fabric. Someone near the back spoke too loudly, nerves posing as confidence. "This is ridiculous. It is just a misunderstanding." "It is not a misunderstanding," Maggie answered without turning. "It is a contract." The photographer lifted his camera and the flash cut the dim like lightning practicing. For a second, the room was a series of cutouts. Lydia's profile, Arthur's hands, my face with the kind of calm that makes other people question their stories. Then darkness resumed its state and the picture went where pictures go when rooms are done with them. Guests began to leave in small, decent lines. They took their programs and their favors and what remained of their certainty. No one ran, no one pleaded. People who live in Poland do not announce retreat. They execute it. Near the foyer, a young woman paused by me with a look she could not classify. "You did the right thing, sir." Then she waited to see if I would sign off on her opinion. I gave her a nod so small it fit in her pocket. The night breathed through the open doors. I stepped aside to let a pair of elderly men pass. They moved shoulder to shoulder like boys who had promised to do so long ago. One of them muttered a prayer that sounded like a list. The other answered amen in the key of resignation. Lydia finally crossed to me alone. When she stopped, the dress made a soft sound only fabric knows how to make. Her eyes searched mine for a way to undo a choice and found only what choices leave behind. "Is there any way to fix this?" "Not tonight." She absorbed it. It entered the place under the ribs where truth sits when it knows its name. Maggie touched my elbow and leaned in just enough. "We have secured vendors and staff. Occupancy is good throughout the hour. Do you require anything further from us, Mr. Cole?" "No. You have done your job. Better than most. Thank you." Her eyes held mine for the measure of trust, and then moved on to lift another weight somewhere else. Outside the terrace, riders called for cars with fingers in the dark. Engines arrived like mild animals. Tail lights marked exit paths in gentle red. People lowered their voices to the volume of quiet streets. A child asked why the music had gone to sleep, and a mother said, "Because it is time for it to dream." By the time the last tray was covered and the band had cased their instruments, the reporter had his lead. By morning, a headline would learn its own legs. The wedding was halted mid-reception after the father canceled the final payment. Underneath it, a clip captured a man at a microphone and the sound of paper tearing. The comments would do what comments do. Some would call me cruel. Others would call me correct. Neither would know the years. The river carried night toward the sea, and the room gave itself back to the building it lived in. Linen folded, glass nested, chairs stacked sense over spectacle. I walked the edge of the dance floor and checked nothing old habits looking for a job. There was nothing to tighten. The decision had been set. Days do what nights cannot. they make everything visible. By noon the next day, the clip would be everywhere that thrives on drama fed by detail. Corporate boards would reach out for Arthur's version of leadership and find themselves picking splinters from their reputation. A gala would discover its sponsor declined to be seen next to humility that only worked under perfect light. A courier arrived at my office 3 days later with a thick envelope bound in navy ribbon as if seriousness had a dress code. Inside copies, petition for annulment filed by Benjamin Whitlock, language built for courtrooms, grounds, misrepresentation of family standing and financial background. The phrasing did not surprise me. It lived in his world. Explanations dressed as facts, consequence dressed as reason. I set the petition on my desk and placed a mug on the edge to keep it from traveling. Alan read and exhaled. This will move quickly. He looked at me as if to ask whether quickness felt like mercy. I told him speed is only a tool. Its virtue depends on who is holding it. That night the house was quiet the way a finished room is quiet. No echo, no apology. I stood at the sink with my hands under cool water and watched what little dust the day had left rinse away. Behind me, the blue door from the old dollhouse leaned against a stack of job folders. It had found its way out of the attic on its own. Or maybe I had brought it down without thinking. Either way, it was there. It clicked when I set it on the shelf. No camera heard it. No room clapped. Still, the sound meant what it had always meant. Something that swings should also settle. You cannot buy the truth back once it has put its feet on the floor. You can try to carpet over it. You can try to dim it down. But light finds what belongs to it. In the ballroom and in the morning and in the week that followed, people learned which parts of themselves were furniture and which were doors. I slept, not as a victor, as a man whose name fit where it needed to. At sunrise, my coffee did not taste like revenge. It tasted like peace. Steam rose in a slow ribbon and disappeared into the quiet above my desk. The office was a box of first light and dust motes, empty enough that you could hear the building breathe. On the wall, the brushed steel letters of Cole Construction and Design caught the sun and turned it into a clean line. I stood there with my mug and let morning do what nights cannot. It made everything visible without asking for applause. Invoices had been settled where they were owed and not a dollar beyond. Vendors were paid for what they delivered. The rest sat where I left it, unspent and honest. I did not keep a tally that made me feel taller. I kept the one that makes a man sleep. The leather envelope was back in a drawer with cords and spare drill bits. The drawer closed without ceremony. It was enough. I walked the shop once the way I have since I hung the first permit here. The concrete floor showed a scatter of chalk, a small arc of sawdust, and a forgotten pencil without an eraser. Work leaves crumbs. That is how you know it has been done. I checked the whiteboard. 2 service calls, 1 pickup at the yard, a door installed on maple that needed a second hinge because the jam was proud. My hands remembered the measure without needing to be told. The front bell clicked, not a ring. Just that soft tongue of metal that tells you someone has crossed into your space with intention and maybe a little fear. I set the mug down and waited. The second sound was the door easing shut, then careful footsteps along the hall, soft soles learning how to ask permission. Lydia stood at the office threshold with her hair pulled back and a face that had stopped making space for performance. The jacket she wore was not a statement. It was something warm. In her hands she held nothing, which is how you know someone is here for the truth and not for props. I said her name the way you set a level on a sill and watched to see where the bubble rests. Lydia. She looked around at the framed permits, the job photos, the shelf with 3 old trophies shaped like hammers, and 1 chipped coffee mug that had survived 2 falls. Her eyes landed on the steel letters and stayed. I want to build something real, Dad. I waited a breath. Some sentences need to stand on their own legs before you answer them. Then start where I did with your hands. She nodded once. I saw the swallow that comes when pride walks back into a room and does not ask for a chair. She stepped closer and placed her palms on the edge of my desk as if it were a rail on a porch you plan to keep. She did not cry. She did not argue her history. She did not offer the room that had taught her to pretend. I told her the work. Mornings begin before the sun remembers your name. Boots that can forgive mistakes. A notebook that does not lose its place. Phones answered with a pencil ready. The first title for anyone who comes through that door begins with junior and ends with assistant. After that, you earn a different word. Earn, rebuild, prove. She took the words in. They did not bounce off. They went where words go when a person is ready to carry them. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a small spiral notebook and a cheap pen that writes even when you hold it upside down. I handed them across. Tools are not always made of steel. She looked at the notebook like a promise she had not expected to be offered. I told her about the morning list. Bathroom fixtures for the maple job. Call back Mrs. Shaw about the door sweep. Inventory sheet for the sandpaper that disappears faster than it should. The kind of tasks that keep a company honest even when no one is watching. She said she did not know the programs we use for scheduling. I told her the programs came after the habit. Habit first, software later. She breathed out and it sounded like someone setting down a box. We walked to the shop floor together. The light had advanced a few inches along the concrete and turned the chalk into a bright line that felt like a welcome. I pointed at the pegboard where we keep the small things that matter. Put the tape measures back at the end of every day. Write the names on the blades we dull so we learn why they go dull. Sweep as if the person who will stand here after you is the one you are trying to be. She nodded. No speeches, no apologies. The right silence for the room we were in. I introduced her to the morning. It sounded like the first airline hiss from the compressor. It smelled like coffee that had gone from hot to strong and would be poured into a thermos anyway. It looked like the logo on the wall was catching light without asking for credit. She stood in all of that and set the notebook on a stool like a student who understood that the test had already begun. There were words still inside me that wanted to organize the last few weeks into wisdom. I did not let them. Wisdom that insists too quickly is no better than noise. I told her the start time. She said she would be early. I told her what early means here. Lights on, list ready, broom in hand without being asked. She asked the only question that mattered. Will you be the one I report to know? You will start with Rosa on scheduling and with Nathan on the yard. They are younger than you. They know more than you do about mornings here. Listen to them. Earn your next sentence. She set her chin and said she would. That sentence belonged to her. It rang true in a way that made the room stand up a little straighter. We walked back toward the office and the bell made its soft sound again. Alan stepped in with his briefcase and an expression that asked if now was a good hour. He saw Lydia and measured the air quickly. He asked if he should return later. Lydia answered before I could. Stay. I am here to work, not to hide. Alan smiled in the part of his mouth that is not trained for courtrooms. He put the case down and said there was paperwork for a new hire and a small mountain of forms that said the government knows we exist. Lydia reached for the pen. I watched the steel letters on the wall take a brighter slice of the sun and throw it back at the room. The light landed on the logo and traveled into the grain of the desk, and then to the steam still curling from the coffee machine on the shelf. The machine gave a short, steady sigh as it finished its job and went quiet in a way that said it would be ready the next time it was needed. There is a kind of forgiveness that is loud and looks good on camera. I have never trusted it. The forgiveness I understand is a bench you build out of solid stock and set in the yard. Every day you sit on it, it proves itself again. Every rain and every winter it earns its place. No ribbon, no headline, just use. Lydia finished her forms and looked up with that question children ask without speaking. Is there anything else? There is always something else. I handed her a set of simple gloves and pointed to the back room where the delivery had left a load of trim. Stack it by size. Label the shortest pieces. Sweep when you are done. Then come find me and we will go over the maple hinge together. She smiled without decoration. It was a small light and it was her own. She picked up the notebook and the gloves and walked toward the work. I returned to the desk and stood for a moment with my palms flat on the wood. You learn to feel a surface for truth even when it looks straight. It is a habit that has saved me more times than any speech. The bell clicked again as the door eased shut behind her. The office was quiet, not empty, ready. I lifted the mug. It was still warm enough to do what coffee is for. Outside a truck went by and caught a gear with a clean sound. Inside the espresso machine whispered once more and then settled into a hush that matched the room. Forgiveness does not erase. It rebuilds. It asks you to show up, pick up the right tool, and place your weight where it belongs. It keeps a record in the grain, not on a banner. It turns noise into breath. It takes the long way home and calls it honest. I took a sip and looked at the logo where the light made a promise anyone could read. Then the front door opened again and brought in a sliver of day. We had work to do. The machine sighed, the room eased to a soft hum. I let the sound guide the fade in my chest until the only thing left was morning. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.